there's a little bit of pushback on Twitter from consumers. I think Mountain Dew fans, of whom there are many out there, I think they're very disappointed that A, it's not higher in alcohol, and
Yeah.
B, it doesn't have caffeine. Of course, it's not going to have caffeine after the Four Loko fiasco,
And it has no
but
sugar, right? It
and no
is kind of
sugar, right?
as far away from Mountain Dew as you can possibly get.
Right. It's weird because even Burwick says or Jim said it's the twisted tea of the
Right.
of the soda waters. And twisted tea is high calorie and I guess has natural caffeine in it. I don't know. And so this Mountain Dew will have zero sugar, 0 calories, zero. Well, no, maybe not 0 calories, probably 100 calories.
It's still going to be hard soda to
Yeah.
everybody. I mean,
Yeah, but their competitors for Loco. I mean, think
Why-
about people who drink Mountain Dew. They drink Four Loco. And
I think their biggest competitor is probably going to be Twisted Tea.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Four Loko,
yeah.
I just don't see that overlapping at all.
Huh. You don't see them as the same drinker.
No, I see more Twisted Tea. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
a lot
it's
like-
gonna be 5%. Four Loko hardly makes anything 5%.
No, I understand that. That's why I'm saying they dropped the ball. Is that they should be going after Four Loko instead of Twisted Tea.
I wonder
Because
if they made
Mountain
it.
Mountain Dew drinkers. I mean, just look at the can.
Sure.
It looks more like a Four Loko than it does a Twisted Tea. I mean, or when I say juice or any of those outlandish 24-ounce cans with barbed wire and wolves on it, Wolverines.
Yeah,
gotta
I
look
mean, it
hard.
definitely looks like an energy drink.
I wonder
So
why it is only 5%, right? Like, I wonder, because you would think Mountain Dewers go hard, right? To your
Yeah, they
point,
get
Jay.
jacked up. Yeah.
Exactly.
They
You
do
can get jacked
they
up on
do
5% ABV. It's strange. I wonder if it was kind of like a sort of a conciliation to the fact that it's a soda brand and we don't want to be too egregious with putting our alcohol in a soda brand.
I think that's totally it. I think that's exactly the reason. I think to come out with an 8% brand with a soda pop label on it is pretty risque. I think this is a test, seeing how people respond, and I'm sure to see how their distributor network is going to respond. We've already seen a few of those emails come across the transom.
Angry elves.
Little angry, yeah, a lot of angry elves. And I think in Jim's mind, he was like, well, this is such a small, this isn't going to be a big deal. It's just a Four Loko, right? But I think to a lot of people, this is also a huge shift in strategy, and it brings another distribution competitor to the cold box, Pepsi. But like Jim said, they would have done this anyway with Boston beer or without, probably. So
yeah, it's funny though that it's almost the complete opposite of what Coke did, though. Coke,
right?
Coke initially said, "Hey, we'll worry about producing it. Molson Coors, y'all take it from here."
Yep.
Pepsi says, "Hey, y'all produce it, and then we'll take it from there." I don't know. I think I would. I'd rather be in Coke's position, trusting the beer distribution network over trying to take that on ourselves.
Well, it kind of depends on what your long-term strategy is, and I think Jim put it best: is they had the choice to be the supplier or the distributor, and they made the smart choice being the distributor.
They made the smart choice, for them.
Right. For Pepsi.
Yeah.
Hold on. Tom's having trouble getting on, so I need to resend him the link. I guess I sent him the wrong one. I don't know. Always something, right, Jen?
Always something. Until he gets on. It is interesting that I guess they're making this bet because they have to, right? Like, everybody's already picked their dance partner, right? Coke, Topo Chico, Molson Coors, and Bang. But even though Topo Chico has done well so far, considering, neither them nor Bang have blown the doors off of anything. I mean, yeah, Topo Chico is gaining share and that sort of thing, but it remains to be seen just how well it could do if they could get the supply. But like, who knows? This could be a phase that isn't really a thing, or it could be huge. I know, Harry, you said you thought it was going to be huge, but I think it'll get trial, but beyond that, I'm not so sure.
I'm with you, Jen. I think Topo Chico has excelled, but it's also in its best markets right now. From here, I don't know if it'll see a little more lift, but it's not going to explode like it did in those first few markets.
I think it'll do well. I think it's a bigger deal, just the structure of the deal and the precedent that it's set, and the glass ceilings that it's broken. And when I was growing up, it was anathema for Coke or Pepsi to even think of putting an alcoholic beverage on their trucks, and that mainly it was because they didn't want to be associated with alcohol. Alcohol's dirty, I mean, my father had a beer distributorship in the same town that my grandfather had a Pepsi bottler. Were they all? They weren't even in the same part of town, much less the same building or the same trucks. Why? I mean, even as a child, I saw that was stupid. And but that's the way it was. And
laws,
the Honickmans and the and the Reyes and the and the Odoms and these distributors that already have Pepsi and Coke franchises are ahead of the game, which surprises no one. You got to skate to where the puck is.
You need some nice skates, though, to do that. I mean, you need some real expensive skates to get there.
Turbo boost skates.
Biscuit, come here. That's a good dog. Make you really sad dog. Make you really mad dog. Hello, Tom.
What the heck?
Listen, I probably had a link from 4 days ago that I was sending you. Sorry about that.
I'm like my big chance and the technical issues.
Well, luckily this isn't live, so we'll edit out the part where I look like a bonehead. I always edit those parts out and I make myself look good. By the way, this is Biscuit, my co-partner. And
very familiar with Biscuit. Biscuit's the hero, the superstar.
Yeah. And then we have Jenn and Jordan, who I think
Good to see
Jordan.
you, Jen. Jordan.
Hey, Tom.
Well, thanks for being on here. This is Tom Fox with CM Profit Group, kind of tied in with category management, retailers, suppliers, and distributors, really. And you've been around forever. So thanks for coming on, Tom. Big news this morning, huh?
It was. That was nice scoop you had this morning. That was great.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, that's one of the nice things of being quick on your feet. When Jim Cook calls it 8:30 at night, Jen and I answer.
Yeah, I can imagine. 5:15 in the morning, we wait for that email with bated breath.
What's interesting to me is, according to what Jim says in the release, Pepsi is going to take the kind of the commercial side of the business, the merchandising side, the sales side, and Boston Beer will take the overall top line marketing, which is weird.
It is
because it's usually the opposite, But
I mean, Boston's strengths are on the sales and execution side and the relationship side. So with the trade, that was interesting. But I'm assuming Pepsi just did not want to give that up. That was probably important to Pepsi. A couple of things struck me when I saw that. One was the fact that it was not a seltzer, that it's an FMB. That's obviously very strategic. Who knows where the seltzer segment's going? It's probably going to be very healthy a year from now, but you don't know. FMBs are going to be healthy, so that's obviously a little bit bigger umbrella. So that I thought that was wise on their part, and it's obviously a mega brand. I mean, gosh, Mountain Dew has such loyalty; it's really crazy. And the third thing was like, why Boston beer? I mean, obviously we all have enormous respect for Boston beer, but but there could have been other partners they could have picked that would have been certainly when you think about the margin pool, they're going to have to split. Boston would carry a premium. They're gonna want theirs. They deserve that. They could have gone in other directions. But they obviously feel that Boston can help them on the brewing side. And
when we talked to Jim last night, I think there's two things there. One is the Dave Burwick comes from Pepsi, and so I didn't realize this. He comes from Mountain Dew. I mean, he was I think a Mountain Dew VP at some. So there's that, and then also he says that they could have gone to just a contract packaging, but they did want the value add of the alcohol expertise that Pepsi doesn't have. Which brings me to, so how is Pepsi going to control the mouse when they're not even in that part of the cold box? In other words, they're going to have to deal with AB and other people to get into the box. Whereas if Boston job, they already have capabilities in category management within the alcohol space, right? I mean, am I right there?
You are right, but I just assume what that's going to look like is Boston will have some kind of synergy with them because Boston's got the relationships. Boston can get distribution. So despite the fact that AB and Molson Coors manage much of the captaincies out there, Boston's navigated those waters very successfully by getting whatever they want on the shelf. They have a lot of demand for their products. They've got great sales and category management teams that have been able to build those relationships and get the execution. So Pepsi's going to have to rely a lot on Boston there. So I'm sure they didn't get into a lot of those nuances, but if Boston isn't involved, that would be kind of crazy because you're right. Pepsi, very few buyers out there have, there may be someone who's controlling all of merchandising. They would have control over all the cold box and all the shelf space for beverages, but there's typically a much different buyer for non-alc than there is for alcohol. So they don't have those relationships. They're going to need Boston's help for sure.
I guess that informs us or tells me that Pepsi is serious about learning about the alcohol sales trade and forging those relationships. So in other words, this is a long-term thing. This is not a Mountain Dew issue. I mean, this is, and it also brings another beverage alcohol distributor to the marketplace in the Pepsi network.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Yeah.
So we've yet to see how that works.
And I'm wondering where it's going to be priced at too, Harry. I mean, because obviously the Mountain Dew core drinker is probably a mainstream drinker. So I would think that that's falling right into Boston's hands, that this is going to be largely incremental for them, which I think is obviously really attractive to them. And then, like you said, look at the Pepsi portfolio. I mean, what's next? They would have all kinds of options as to where they could go to infuse alcohol with. I mean, there could be 30 different brands. I mean, who knows what's next?
Right.
They kind of hinted at that in a follow-up. We did, believe it or not, Tom, we have these nefarious backdoor sources that send us things. You're not going to believe this, but we did see the email that John Guy sent to wholesalers. And he did kind of say, in the future, there could be potential for you wholesalers, to get something eventually. So, because of course, understandably, some of the Boston wholesalers weren't too happy to not be peddling this.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm sure the on-premise side is going to offer some opportunity. So there'll be a way for them to get their, their involvement there. But no,
that's a mighty skinny bone to throw out there, Tom.
It is.
I can't imagine much Mountain Dew is going to be drank on premise at your country clubs. But
on draft, right?
on draft. But you never know. Listen, nothing. Throw the rule book out the window. Mountain Dew could be the biggest number one player next year in Buffalo Wild Wings.
But you look at with Jim Cook, like you said, look how his he's got his tentacles in so many different areas. You just have to sit back and admire what they've done and what they're continuing to do. It's very impressive.
I'm wondering, you remember when embev came to the United States, or as embev,
Right.
And, they kind of ingratiated themselves in with Anheuser-Busch to learn the business and then ended up buying them.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think this is like that kind of play, but I'm wondering if Pepsi is using Boston Beer to kind of learn the business, because who else would you want to learn from?
Right.
Than Boston Beer. I mean, in your surveys, don't they rank kind of toward the top of the?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you talk about Boston Beer. I mean, boy, for both our on-premise and our on and off, they both are number one. Gallo is a really strong number one in overall beverage alcohol, but Boston has been number one in beer for really the last several years in both on and off, and continue to really grow and their performance increases. And not every supplier can say that. There are a few. I mean, Constellation's done very well lately. A really out of nowhere the last couple of years, New Belgium has really gotten on the map. Have done a really nice job. And Molson Coors and AB are, despite their performance issues, have done well. Not as well as they probably would want to be doing, but they're exceeding expectations. But they're not they're not in the top two. You got Boston and Constellation are 1 and 2, Molson Coors 3.
Who's improved the most in the last few years on your?
Well, it's been New Belgium.
Yeah. Okay.
And Constellation's improved too. Constellation's always done well, but they now have a bigger seat at the table, and they're commanding more resources, allocating more resources against chains and category management, so that they've done very well. But it's funny when you look at we ask retailers like who is the best. So average score, Boston, Constellation do well, but when we ask 50 major national and regional chains who does the best job, AB still gets more mentions than anybody, but their average score isn't as high as they probably would want. But when they want to do it, they're with their whole zero-based budgeting, probably some accounts aren't getting the service that they might want, but where they want to do it, AB does well, and Molson Coors is not far behind. So they have the most mentions, but they don't have the best averages, not as good as they would want, for sure.
Huh, that is interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that does make sense, because when the few buyers that I talk to regularly, it's always bitching about AB, but then they're like, they wouldn't consider anybody else to be their captain.
Well, what's important when you do these space partnerships? It's timeliness, getting it done, and then getting it done on time and executing. And AB has always done very well with that. Always.
Boy, so any other what changes have you seen, just regardless of this kind of big news, but just in the last year and a half, just a general question, what are you seeing out there, Tom?
Well, when we talk to buyers, there's a handful of things. One, they certainly, many of them certainly love this virtual relationship that they've been building with all of their suppliers. Some, and it's not the majority, but maybe 20% really want to get back to in person. They do think in person generates better brainstorming and productivity, but many of them are like, I can see more suppliers now. Our reach of having appointments, we just seem to be able to get to more people. So I don't think, heck, now with the Delta variant, we see companies probably going to throw out some additional restrictions again, but the vast majority, I think, are really comfortable with most of their appointments being virtual. That's certainly something that I would have expected that to kind of, the pendulum to kind of go back. I don't know if it is, just because the productivity and, my gosh, the savings on travel and all that goes with that. I look at our own little business, we're in the training business, and, I've always had like limited capacity of how much work you could do, because if you're on a plane, you can accommodate the one client. But, I would say, in a typical week, I may have 2 or 3 hour gigs in the same day, which I would have never been able to do before. So I can't wait to get back out and see people again. And I think that's going to happen at some point, but
that is interesting. And I've also found, and I'd like to see if you found this too, that distributors as well were, it was nice not having so many suppliers coming in their warehouses all the time demanding now.
Well, no, I think that's a thing. And, having supplier reps wanting to work with distributor reps in the street and riding together. And there's, a lot of influence. You can build these, these ambassadors for your brands, if you can get out on the street and working with them. And I'm sure many distributors were like cringing of like, geez, that kind of takes my rep out of their realm, and it doesn't lead to the productivity that we need them to do. And so babysitting a supplier, now they have this, this ability to say, you know what, no more ride withs, which I know suppliers are probably bummed out about. And I do think that will resume at some point, but that along with, attending sales meetings, and, I'm not sure how many distributors are still telling suppliers you're not even allowed in the building. Now, some of them are letting people back in, but it's probably been on some levels, a welcome sign to keep suppliers out, just because they've got so many of them, and big productivity lapse when there's just too many meetings.
Absolutely. Well, the big brewer meetings in the fall will be interesting if those continue. Probably not. I'm guessing.
I'm holding my breath for MEWA. I really hope that I think they're committed, and I'm really excited about that. I think we all are looking forward to getting back together.
Yeah. And CBA, and but I think it's going to be tough, man.
I know.
But that's another thing. I think the brewers were kind of like, God, we saved so much money not having these giant meetings. I mean, those are multi-million-dollar productions, I would imagine.
No question. No question.
Just going, my little 500-person conference, I can't believe how much that costs.
Right.
Highway robbery. That's what it is.
Well, you always fill them up.
Yeah, see, I hope so. We're ours is in January in California, so we're crossing our fingers we can still do that. But
I hope so.
So is there as far as suppliers, as far as how chain retailers view the big suppliers, is there a big difference between on-premise and off-premise as far as the suppliers' abilities?
You would think there might be some, but I would say if you look at the top 10 in all of beverage alcohol, I mean, you've got, Beam does really well on the spirit side. Bacardi does really well on the spirit side, both in on and off. Gallo is number one in on and off. They always have been. They're not it's not a huge gap between Gallo and Boston Beer, but it is interesting that, Boston Beer is run by former Gallo alumni. So those, John and George, they kind of follow that same playbook, very process driven, and it starts day one. Constellation does well on the wine side, does really well on the beer side. I would say if you're committed to the most important accounts, you're probably allocating resources and developing people to understand the customer and exceed their expectations. It's not, I mean, you look at the numbers, Harry, they really haven't improved over the last 5 to 10 years. I think what's happened is, these operators in the on-premise and these chains in the off, I mean, their demands and expectations continue to rise, along with the capabilities of these suppliers are getting better. So it's kind of a moving target. So you would think that companies would be, we have a 1 through 4 scale. You'd think they'd be approaching, 3.5, 3.6, but they never do. It's always, they kind of stall out at the 3.3, 3.4 level. And, no one's ever really happy with their score, but the retailers are demanding, and they're, and that's just kind of the way it is. And it's going to get harder and harder, because you look at who they're putting in places, some of these retailers. I mean, look at some of the folks who these folks call on. I could mention a million names, but you don't have to go any further than your backyard. Rusty Woodland may be one of the sharpest guys in the industry. I mean, he just is on top of it, and he's not the only one. So when I was calling on chains back when I worked at Miller in the 90s, you would see the former bagger who moved his way up, and now he's a buyer, and now they've got degrees and master degrees, and so it's all different. And you talk to some of the real executives, they really believe that their buying and category management staffs are much sharper than what the suppliers are sending in to call on them. So they feel like they really have the upper hand.
That is interesting. And it seems to me that retailers and suppliers are much more tied together today than they were just even a few years ago. And when I say tied together, I mean, it's a real collaborative in sharing data, and, almost where the companies share employees almost to a point. Am I getting that right?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, there's where they can do it legally, there's a lot of labor on the supplier side in the offices or even virtually that are dedicated to those chains, and not just one person or two people. In some cases, it's little armies of people, and oftentimes we hear stories that they're involved with other categories. They're just labor, but it's value add for the chain, and I'm sure the supplier gets jump balls and gets considerations just because of the commitment they're making. But yeah, there's no doubt. But you say that, but at the same time, the number one service or competency that retailers want from their beverage alcohol suppliers is to be understood. They want their suppliers to understand the strategies, the tactics, the goals, the KPIs, and it is not the best thing we do. I mean, it is a pretty fundamental competency, and yet most people walk in with their portfolio lens and sometimes have a hard time really jumping into the shoes of the customer. And if you don't do that, then your influence is going to be limited. And we know that the companies that do well in that competency, their overall impressions are always the best.
Huh.
Yeah.
And so it's, the one size fits all doesn't work anymore.
No.
And going in and just pushing your own products doesn't work anymore.
But it's funny, a lot of companies culturally are still kind of built that way, and they're not category centric at all.
Right. Who is you mentioned New Belgium.
Yeah.
And was that I guess that was intentional. They decided at some point we need to step up our game in this area, because I fairly think I remembered something like that.
Oh, no question. They have brought in so much more, so many more bodies in their department. I mean, when I found out how many folks that New Belgium had in the on-premise, I was really taken back. I'm like, wow, they've made a huge commitment. And we've had meetings with several of their folks, and they're on top of it. I mean, they really, and they're not necessarily approaching Boston numbers, but heck, in the on-premise they're actually pretty close. And the off, they're really, I mean, they're neck and neck with AB in terms of overall impression, and just a small little step back from Molson, Coors, and Constellation in Boston. So yeah, the commitment at New Belgium is made. I mean, I think they're not in any shortage relative to data, and even the manpower, given the scale that they bring. They've made a major investment. They really have.
Are there any other craft brewers that come to mind that have done that as well?
Well, I mean, Founders, Bell's have definitely stepped up their game. They are achieving scores at a exceeds expectation level. Not approaching New Belgium. Sierra Nevada has always been very steady. I'm sure Joe would probably want their scores to be a little higher. They're not bad, but they're not quite at that New Belgium Boston level. So I mean, those companies do well, but I mean, they don't have the army that the other companies have. They just don't have the same size of a national accounts team. But but they do well.
Well, let's say, like, if you were a mid-sized craft brewer and you're like, I want to build out my chain department, would it be smarter to start with smaller regional chains, or would it be smarter to start at the very top, with Walmart and Kroger?
Kroger for sure. And Walmart's they're obviously big time into the craft business now for sure. I mean, they under index with craft, but they sell a lot of it. I mean, they just sell so much mainstream beer. But yeah, it's a great question. I think it's yes and yes. You have to manage the regionals well. You're going to get FaceTime with regionals probably a lot easier than you are with Kroger and Walmart. But you have to. I mean, I don't think you can win if you don't have some coverage with Walmart and Kroger. So it's yes and yes. You have to do both.
Right. Okay. Jen, I don't want to steamroll you now. You got it?
No. I mean, those are all great questions. I guess my only other question would be who, and you've kind of spoken to this, but obviously we think of AB as the biggest like category captain. Any ones we haven't mentioned that are doing more with category captainships than we know?
Well, I mean, again, I think, the constellations have definitely become, absolutely an alternative for a large retailer to partner with in lieu of Molson Coors or AB, certainly. And
with their shopper first set, their shopper first set, is that really gaining traction?
First, yeah,
Okay.
their shopper first is something that we hear a lot of retailers talk about. It appears to have some elements that many retailers believe is a better mousetrap than what AB and Molson Coors would have. I think it focuses on profitability, which the old mousetrap of how you would set space would be a combination of unit sales based on, okay, there's some demand, we got to have it, and then based on allocation, it never really factored in revenue or profit. It was just basically how much unit demand do we have, and we can allocate the shelves to make sure there's enough supply on the shelf to accommodate the demand. And I guarantee you Molson Coors and AB have approaches that would factor it in too, but you got to give Constellation credit. Shopper first is something we hear about from a lot of retailers, so they are definitely talking about it. And the big challenge I think would have is their distributor going to be loyal? If they're a AB or Molson Coors distributor, are they going to be loyal to the approach that Molson Coors or AB has, or are they going to abort that and jump right into shopper first? I'm sure that's something that is of paramount importance to Constellation, because if they can't sell their distributor on it, then it doesn't really matter. It
Right.
won't fly.
It is a compelling argument, though. It's first of all, it's all high end. They're
Right.
focused on all high end, and then so it's the Mexican beers are the perfect demo, or whatever I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say.
It's a perfect combination. It's at the intersection of demand and profit. They've kind of got it.
Yeah. Thank you. And they have total beverage alcohol,
right?
If you want that, option, I guess. Well, okay. Well, I know you're busy, but I wanted to also seltzers. We can't stop. We can't let you go without talking about seltzers. What are you hearing from retail? Are they overspaced now? Are they underspaced? What's going on?
Oh, I think there is no question they're overspaced. I mean, retailers have jumped in with both feet, and for good reason. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens with fall and spring resets, because I would imagine they are not going to be very patient in hanging on to what might be considered unnecessary duplication. I'm sure the top 10 are going to be fine, but boy, the innovation. And I was doing some training for a client that's in the seltzer business yesterday, and looking at a SKU ranking report. The top 5 SKUs were all down 50% or greater in this market. I mean, that's just, I've never seen that before. Now, they've still had some scale, but I mean, most consumers, they're running to the new innovation and to what's next. And so that is such a challenge. And, that does speak to another element of our research that I wanted to mention, that one of the things that really changed, if you look at what's most important, I mentioned it was this idea of empathy and understanding the customer. The number two or number 3, it's in the top 3, is assortment. So for years, retailers were very skeptical that most companies' assortment analysis and assortment solutions were going to be very subjective and very skewed around their portfolio and not around what's best for the category. But because of COVID and there was supply issues, and so many retailers really just put on the shelf what they could, and the consumer gravitated back to these core and traditional brands. Now that we're still supply issues out there, certainly some companies worse than others, but now the retailer's like, I know I've got to continue to figure out what's best to carry. And so now assortment services went from a pretty low priority. Now they have raised it up. And so one of the huge changes coming out of COVID was just this need for suppliers to provide better analysis and better solutions around what we should carry, because they've got to find the middle ground of carrying what they need to stay in stock and accommodate the masses, but they also have to have the innovation piece down. And I mean, when I mentioned a second ago, the top 5 SKUs within the seltzer segment all being down 50%. I mean, at what point do you have to, make more moves? It's really a challenge, and they're telling us they need a lot of help with that.
Hey, Tom.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a question kind of on that too. I know distributors, a good chunk of them have been miffed on Molson Coors cutting so many SKUs. Have you had that have you seen that type of reaction from retailers? Are they a little more happy about what Molson Coors is doing?
I would say they're much more okay with it than a distributor would be, because I'm certain there's some distributors like, oh my God, I sell a lot of whatever, and they, you know, a lot of regular Milwaukee's Best, which like you don't even see anymore. But the retailers would be like, you know, hallelujah.
Okay, that's what I figured. Just making sure.
That's a rude thing to say about Milwaukee's beef.
Hey, I sold it. Listen, I'm the one guy that thought Colders 29 was can't miss. That's going to be the next big thing, which of course, Jenn and Jordan have never heard of Colders 29, I'm sure, but you and I remember that one, Harry. How could that not make it? I mean, that's just everything going.
I know. Well, it's just before its time. Well, good. Well, thank you, Tom. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we missed. Well, one more thing just before I let you go. And that kind of relates to Jordan's question. SKUs.
Yeah.
Are we seeing retailers gravitate toward fewer SKUs or more SKUs or the same?
Well, they all say fewer, but then when you look at the sets and you see how many SKUs within seltzer that they're putting in, you know, they're probably talking out of both sides of their mouth. But I think there's no question that they realize they've got to have allocation on the shelf for their top items and the ones that are growing that are going to need more space. I mean, if a Modelo is out of stock, I mean, they're just screwed, right? Or you know, Bud Light or any of the biggest brands. So if you have too much variety, you're going to compromise your allocation, and they can't have that happen. So I think fundamentally they want enough variety that people, you know, don't notice that, oh my gosh, you know, some retailers are known for their variety, so they have to manage that piece. But by and large, the answer is they want to cut back. They absolutely want to cut back. But the key is, how do you do it? And they need help.
Well, a big takeaway I've gotten is that because of COVID, assortment is now important, because assortment basically went to almost zero, you know, not
right.
zero, but you know what I mean? It went back to the baseline of just 30 racks of Bud Light and Miller, you know, and so we're starting at that base, and like it's like we set the whole country back to 1985. Right, as far as assortment, you know, we took the country. This is what 1980 or 1995, let's say, this is what it looked like, and it kind of did look like that, you know, just, you know, not that many SKUs, just mostly big packs. And then so we're starting there, and now we're trying to cram 30 years of category management into, you know, 6 months.
When I first got out of college, I was working for an AB distributor in Charlottesville, and when they came out with Pick a Pair, that was like our big promotion over, if you remember that, like pick a pair of 12 packs or pick a pair. And, you know, we had 18 SKUs. I don't even know. It wasn't very many. And I remember my boss was like, if you don't sell Michelob Dark into every account, don't come back back in. I'm like, they don't want Michelob Dark. He's like, put it in there. Sell it to the dishwasher. I don't care. Get it in there.
Yeah. Just for the placement. Just get gotta have the placement. Right. Oh man. Well, great. Well, thanks, Tom. Anything you'd like to plug to our 5 listeners, or
well, you know, I'm first of all really appreciative of the chance to come on, and CM Profit is our research arm. I would be remiss without saying that we started another LLC called Fox Sales Coaching. So all of our training business kind of falls under the Fox Sales Coaching umbrella. All the research comes out of CM Profit. So CM Profit and my partner, Carol Breedlove, still very much aligned and love the research element. But, you know, we've had to, on the Fox Sales Coaching side, obviously pivot everything to virtual. But we also came out with something we're calling the Fox Selling System, which is a learning platform that's encompasses a lot of e-learning modules. It has a lot of live virtual training. It's got a sales scorecard that a distributor or supplier could use to monitor, the selling behaviors that someone could have, and we got a sell sheet generator. It's got a lot of stuff to it. It's not necessarily a plug, but it's really, we're trying to really accommodate where the market is going. And if you don't have digital, you don't have anything. And so we have kind of reinvented ourselves, and I've got a partner in San Diego, a company called Learning Evolution, which we have. They are an architecture an online architecture company, and they've taken all of our content, and we've built a heck of a mousetrap, and it's unbelievably affordable. And we've gotten probably 30, 40 companies on it, and we're adding more, but it's the future. And you know, I'm 59 years old. Maybe at some point this will get me off the road, but in the meantime, you know, love what I'm doing. And all we're trying to do, Harry, is help companies get better at selling and get better at coaching. And 22 years later, still busy, and very much appreciate all the support you've given me over the years. So.
Oh, well, likewise, Tom, really. So, well, great. Well, listen, have a great rest of the week. Thanks for coming on. And hey, thank you for drinking beer, bud.
Damn right. Thanks, everybody. See you, Jordan. See you, Jen. See you, Harry. Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.